My name is Tony Jones, and you are tuned in to the Coalition online at coalitionradio.us, where we discuss all forms of local, regional, and national politics, news, and current events. I am excited to announce that this evening I will be live tweeting throughout the program, so you can go on Twitter, coalition_radio, if you have any questions, any feedback. Heck, we'll even take snide remarks. You can send those our way. So we will be live tweeting throughout the program this evening. The days of telephone calls are done. Just let you know that we are on the cutting edge of what is going on in media. The po-taxpayer is, of course, here.
Some would say the bleeding edge, Mr. Jones.
Christine is back. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Tony.
How you feeling?
A bit better.
Did you get any good drugs?
The drugs didn't make any difference.
Okay.
So I'm not bothering with the drugs. I'm high on life.
And spreading the word.
That's right.
You were sorely missed last week. I will let you know that.
Well, I was sore last week, so...
Hey-o! We got to get some money in the budget for that cymbal crash. We could use that here.
We have a budget?
I'll just bring a cymbal. That's all.
So, before we get to our great in-studio guest, currently running for mayor of this fine city of Providence, P.O., you were making some friends, as always, down at the Amtrak station. Tell us a little bit about this, which is up on our Twitter and our Facebook page at facebook.com/thecoalitionradio.
Well, I try in my own little way to spread fear, chaos, and loathing throughout the land. So after last week's show, I had to, given my international lifestyle, I had to jet back up to Boston. So I went down to the Amtrak station. Lo and behold, what awaits me? Well, first of all, of course, I'm taking MBTA. Amtrak wants $26, 26 simoleons to go to Boston. So we had some dead time. And, I go up to buy the ticket, and you folks, you'll see when you go to the station, immediately to the right of the ticket counters, in a very large flat-screen TV, very state-of-the-art, it looks to be about a 15 or 20-minute loop playing of a very, very profound video, what to do in the event of a mass shooting. Yikes! I looked at this in some astonishment. Being a bitter, cynical 53-year-old who's followed politics all his life, I always look for the ulterior motive. I look for the worst in everything. And I said to myself, I can't imagine, first of all, that this is appropriate for a public venue like this. To my knowledge, Tony, there hasn't been a single recorded instance of a mass shooting in an American train station. And for all that say that it's a possibility, I want to say, and I say this very carefully because I lost friends on 9/11. I was in Midtown Manhattan in 1994 when the Trade Center was attacked the first time, and I helped evacuate a data center to Midtown. So I say this not to be funny or sarcastic, but, with cynicism. When I think of international terrorism, I think of London, Athens, Paris, New York, Los Angeles, Providence. And at the same time, what possible impact could a recorded loop do in terms of training people in the proper response in a situation like that? To me, it just strikes me that was there merely to invoke fear.
Was it interspersed with anything else, or was it just that on a loop?
No, that was it on a loop. And we've got a picture of it up on the screen. I took a picture of it. The gendarmes of the Amtrak police seemed eager to meet me after I started taking pictures of their video.
As they often do.
As they often do. And, I identified myself as I am, a member of the major media here.
And you handed him one of your spiffy new business cards.
Right? The look of total revulsion and disgust I haven't seen since college when I visited an all-girls Catholic school. It was just... and I asked him, I said, what was the point? I said, and again, reiterating, this hasn't happened in America. And what possible effect? Well, we want people to be aware. And I have to tell you, when the Bushies were in charge, when we had the color-coded scheme from the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the red, orange, green, it was made sport of, and somewhat justifiably so. because it has a cartoonish effect on what is a very serious issue. But in this case, I firmly believe that throughout our mass transportation system, the powers that be use continual fear as a way of, quite honestly, ruling.
Well, I'm wondering whether somebody had Homeland Security money left over and realized they had to either spend it or give it back.
I would have loved to get the contract to make, I dabble in all forms of the media, I would have loved to get the contract to make said video. I could have got a couple of my public access buddies together.
Chuckles the Clown.
A big tube of fake blood. I could have taken the whole nut of what that contract was, kept it, and made it for, a six-pack of Narragansett and a bunch of my buddies.
And it might have been something worth watching at that
point. Yeah, it would have been a little bit better.
What were the instructions or suggestions?
Well,
duck and cover.
Pretty much duck, cover, panic, and don't get in the way. But if you have to get in the way, take the bullet. I managed to capture on screen the last set of commands, so it's up there.
They weren't still doing the nuclear war duck and cover in school when you were a kid, were they?
No, I'm not that old.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Close.
I don't know when they stopped doing that. I'm not suggesting you're super old. You just told us how old you are.
Beware of the cavalry coming through your school.
Yeah, F troop.
But that was that was a similar kind of a thing. Like, oh my gosh, we have to be terrified of the Red Menace.
Right.
If the Red Menace manages to drop a bomb on us, hiding under your desk isn't going to help you.
No.
And it's kind of the same at the train station. If there's an actual terrorist attack, if you don't already know that racing around in circles, shrieking your head off is not the thing to do, Darwinism is going to be in action there.
Right. And so, in our own way, I have to look at this as a civilian, as a consumer of Amtrak, and say, why are you attempting to inflict fear on me? Are you looking to continue to exert different subtle and not so subtle ways to control the population, to give in to the continual invasion of privacy that's existed in the last 12 years?
And the budget of that was probably part of your $30 train ride from Providence to Boston.
I took the MBTA. So please, we'd love to see your reaction when you look at this, and tell me, am I paranoid? Am I overreacting? Is this a good thing to raise to the public? Throughout New York City, you've got this notion that you're supposed to be looking over your neighbor's shoulder and reporting on each other. I get that a little bit in New York. But it's an awful slippery slope as we continue to give up our privacies and freedoms to this overwhelming sense of fear. It's not unlike the movie Brazil.
Yeah. And there's been a lot more false positives, even in places like New York. Anybody with a turban gets reported.
Right. Well, and you've
including the peaceful Sikhs.
Right.
They just want to be left alone.
Right. And you've got to stop and frisk, and you.
Outrageous things like that.
Right. And so, do we want that here in Rhode Island?
I think no.
I think no either. I'd love to hear when we introduce our guest. I'd love to hear his take on the situation as well. But we are proud to announce tonight that we've got Dr. Dan Harrop. They're the Republican candidate for mayor here in the fine city of La Prave. A little background on Dr. Harrop. He's a Brown University graduate. He's from Rhody, a psychiatrist. He's the past chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party. He is the announced candidate for mayor. He has received the endorsement in past years. And he's also the current chairman of the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me here tonight.
This last conversation, as someone who's a practicing psychiatrist.
It's only a matter of time before we brought a practicing psychiatrist in on this program.
They told me he was the guest. I may actually be here. He may be here for an intervention.
We're taking notes.
This is an intervention.
But what's your take on that, sir?
Well, I don't see what use it is. It's just meant to make people afraid. My suspicion is they just had money they had to use up. It's absolutely useless to do that type of thing. You can train, first responders, obviously, but train passengers, that's not going to do any good at all.
Have you seen, in your mind, as someone who watches the media, have you seen other attempts to sort of create this pervasive sense of fear?
When we've had epidemics in the past, clearly you to get people inoculated, we've created the fear. Now, but fear they use, not education, which is unfortunate. Although fear is a big motivator. It's an important motivator in groups of people.
Do you see, the herd mentality, if you come from the libertarian side, you analyze how government uses emotions to control people's reaction to increased governance. That's how I see this.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you at all with that. Okay. I'm a little more cynical that I think they probably just had some money to use up with this type of thing, and rather than put it back into the budget, they needed to use it.
God forbid they actually
hand
not
money back.
use it.
That's what I'm talking about.
What impact if a child were to sit there, not a little baby, but say, a child, so someone who's 10, 12, 13, 14. I mean, we've instilled all sorts of fear levels in our children. Global warming fear. Sorry. Fear of, you go back to that 1960s famous political commercial where fear of the bomb. Now, we create this overwhelming fear of terrorism in our midst. Is that at all productive for children of that age?
It's not at all productive of children at that age. They should be shielded from that in particular. When the Newtown shootings occurred, there was no reason for children elsewhere to see that and be afraid to go in the first grade the next day. I mean, parents need to shield their own children from that type of media.
Okay. Well, we have a lot to talk about tonight. We want to talk about politics in Providence. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about the libertarian movement here in Rhode Island, out in the world. But let's focus for a few minutes on La Prov, as I call it. Much was made of the current mayor. And we understand that you're not running against the current mayor, but you will be hopefully assuming his legacy.
We hope.
Well, yes, an interesting mix here. But in that sense, much was made of the Category 5 hurricane. If you were to describe, currently using weather terms, we'll put you in the Gary Lay seat here, all right? Or give us a Giorgi factor on the current state of Providence.
Okay, well, it's a Category 4.5 hurricane at the present time. The current mayor, to quote Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste. And there was a good crisis here. And the city of Providence has severe financial problems and still does. The current mayor has managed to push this off down the line until he finishes his first term as governor, and then the city of Providence is going to again run out of money. In other words, he's given us 4 or 5 years. None of the big problems have been handled. And I think he even may have underestimated what's going on. He's selling off the city of Providence at this particular time as much as he can because he knows he needs to avoid a tax increase next year as he goes into his governor's race. And it's going to be almost impossible to do that without further cuts in services.
Okay. When you say selling off Providence, what do you mean?
Well, Camp Cronin essentially is going on up for sale at this particular time. He's closed the pools, and I know he's now got a committee, and that's probably spells the death of that. He's got a committee to look at these things at the moment, and it's that type of thing that he's been doing. That there've been reduced ambulance services. He hasn't sold it off, but he hasn't been able to impose on the towns and cities around us for their ambulance services. Schools have been closed. We've had 5 schools closed, and at the present time they're proposing closing another high school, which may be appropriate in that particular circumstance, but this is a trend that is going on to try to dummy down the city. 26 cents of every tax dollar goes into pensions. Not into education, not into city services. It goes into pensions. And that is a problem he did not handle.
So the much touted pension reform that took place, and he's the first in let's just say in a pretty blatant attempt to compare and contrast himself to Ms. Raimondi, the whole notion of the collaborative effort that took place. Do you find any level of success in what took place during the early part of his first administration?
Sure, he bought us 4 or 5 years, but he didn't fix the problem. The way I contrast it is Raimondo, if her fix takes, and that's still a question in the courts, probably bought us 17 to 20 years. Quite reasonable when you're considering this type of thing. Tavares's fix, while it's was agreed to by the union, so will, except for maybe one or two people, stay, only bought us a few years, and we're back in the same circumstance again. And so without fixing it permanently, the next mayor is going to have to again handle that particular problem.